Welcome very much to Conversation. On this should be airing on March 12 of the year 2011, and it's an honor and a privilege to welcome to the program Sidney J. Gluck. And he's a gentleman of great renown, a tremendously clear writer and a thinker. He's been a political analyst, understands economics. He's been involved in the textile industry at the design level, and he's a real intellectual scholar of the highest note. He's also, I've just coming to realize, the producer of an MNN program that airs every other week at
Pacific Rim News Review. Pacific Rim News Review.
Pacific Rim News Review. He's one of the people who understands the country of China perhaps better than anybody else that I can think of, and he writes very cogently and clearly on all these subjects. And Sidney, it's an honor to welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
What I would like you to do, if you could, is maybe you could talk about yourself a little bit at the beginning. Where were you born and raised, educated a little?
I was born in Brooklyn.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In Williamsburg. 96 years ago.
96, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. In August.
Well, you're in such good shape. What is the secret of being in such good shape that you're in?
Interested in people, interested in what's going on, and connecting with it, and just being
interested. That, I think, is a good prescription. I think that's a good general prescription. If you keep
if I don't know something, I ask a question.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really unlike most of the people in this world who just to go on bumbling through, you know. But okay, so you've learned a good way to live in 96, did you say?
96.
96. Congratulations.
Continue to work.
And continuing to work, and that work has not only been just pedestrian, it's been major work that you've been doing, I know. But you were born in Brooklyn. That was the beginning, and that's a good beginning.
And I had a very interesting experience last year.
Oh, last year.
Somebody wanted to do something right about me, so we went to Brooklyn and Williamsburg, and there's a big Jewish community there.
Okay.
You know, but the place didn't look like when I lived there because it's been rebuilt and all that.
Yeah.
Well, we got to the building, 262 South First Street, and as I was showing the building to the photographer, and we were talking, a black man came out. And we were very easy with us and all that because when I lived there, it was black and white. My father died when I was 4.
Oh, young.
My mother grew up with 4 children.
Wow.
And when I was 8, she almost died. And our neighbor saved her life.
Wow.
Our neighbor was black. And I've never been prejudiced. And that adds a lot to your knowledge.
That also helps for living to...
It helps a lot to your knowledge. It helps a lot to your relationship with people. Not to have prejudices that are beat into you.
Absolutely, really good. You're able to avoid that because I think that's another good prescription for leading a long and interesting and engaging life.
Always learning.
Yeah, always learning. Autodidact, you know, that you're teaching yourself all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. But what about this? So you were in Williamsburg and you were 8 when your mother, and then she did. And what was the setting? What was the setting like? Was it... Because you're an intellectual
There was a big Jewish community.
Okay, right.
We're not religious, so I didn't get involved too much.
There's great respect in the Jewish tradition for learning, isn't there?
For learning,
Yeah, I think there's a great respect for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Israel, they twisted a little bit, but that's another story.
Yeah. But you were interested in that, and you went to school, public school?
High school.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I got the highest marks in a number of subjects when I graduated high school, and I was to get a job in 1933, I think it was, at the Brevoort Savings Bank.
Wow.
That was the honor for getting the highest marks in a number of subjects, but I didn't get the job.
Why?
So I went to my teacher and I said, "What happened?" She didn't answer. I said, "Did Johnson get it?" She says, "No, he's black." I said, "Who got it?" And she gave me a nice white Protestant's name. There's another example of prejudice.
Yeah.
Not having any.
Yeah. That's really good. And you said you got good marks, so you were intellectually doing well as a young man and everything. That was in high school, was that?
Basically, intellectually, I'm not a great intellect.
Okay. Yeah.
But I have a great desire to learn.
Okay.
And to listen.
Right. Okay.
And also, I'm not afraid to react, because if I'm wrong, I learn something.
That's true. You can learn more from mistakes than you can from success sometimes.
That's right.
It's
true.
Yeah, I think that is true too. What about going into university and all that sort of thing?
I went to a couple. I got some degrees at one. I was at the New School for Social Research. I taught there, incidentally, for some 20-odd
Down
years.
on 12th
But
Street.
that was in the evening.
Yeah, right.
And I took studies in the masters and PhDs at the schools when I went to the school.
That's down on 12th Street, that area down there. Yeah, that's a good school.
Now it's down on 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Yes, it's grown. Right. But that's a good school. A lot of good work going on down there. Yeah. And what were you studying there at the new school?
At the new school?
What classes?
Mostly, I was teaching and studying economics.
You were teaching?
Oh, I taught there. I taught political economy.
Okay, that's a term that
and political economy is not the economics that they normally teach.
Right.
You know, economics is divided into two parts. There's classical and there's neoclassical.
Well,
right? And then there's a form of liberalism, which is neoclassical, basically.
Yeah.
I'm interested in classical.
Okay.
The main difference between the two is where does wealth come from and who creates it. And in classical, it's the worker in the factory that creates the commodity, and then when it's sold, it is realized in a money form. But neoclassical, 30 years after Marx created the classical,
neoclassical
in the 1880s, three economists in England developed the neoclassical, and their theory was that the accumulation of wealth comes from the market. That's why all the emphasis is on market. Even to this day.
It is now. Financial markets, particularly now.
The market, period.
But I'm trying to think classical on that, and I'm trying to think of the canon, of that. You had, I don't know, you had, Adam Smith, right? Okay, you got, in 1770.
Now, Adam Smith.
And you had Ricardo.
Adam Smith did not know how the wealth is made. And when
anybody?
And when he was asked about the economic crises, and he didn't have explanations for them.
Right.
And Marx was the first to analyze how profits are made on the capital, on the private capital.
Right. And he was a giant in that. But we had Ricardo, comparative advantage, and then we had, we finally got to where we had, Marshall. Alfred Marshall and all these, and then we get up in the modern thing, and we ended up with
Keynes.
Lord John Maynard Keynes was a
Keynes
giant.
advised,
and you had Schumpeter arguing with him, and then you had Friedman. You have all these other kinds of schools. I don't quite know. You divided down classical and neoclassical. How does that that reading of the thing that is? And
nobody teaches them together.
Okay, nobody teaches them together.
Right.
Yeah.
I did, but no one knows that I know.
And you say you were teaching at the new school, but what about, did you get some formal education to qualify you to teach?
Yes, of course.
And that was at the new school also?
At the new school and City College.
Yeah, okay, at City College.
And one more, for the moment I forget the name of it.
Yeah, right, it happens, yeah. But did you study with any, who did you study with in that, or?
I studied with myself at night and with the teachers during the classes.
And the teachers came and go, but you stayed steady on.
I stayed on.
At the helm, right, of directing your own life.
That's
and everything.
Right.
Yeah, you're very much self-taught.
But then I was brought into business.
Yes.
In the textile field.
You got into textiles.
They built me up. They did a lot of teaching. How to run a business as well as how to make a fabric. So. From that, I continued to learn more about business, and when I went into my own business, because after the war they didn't come through with everything they promised, so I just walked out. And 5 days later, I was in business in the textile field with no money.
Oh boy! Okay.
And on the 6th day, 3 of the biggest clients that were going to be, they went to the bank and got me $90,000 credit that they guaranteed.
And they did that?
And that was in 1946.
Wow. 46 after
46,
the war. Yeah.
47.
Yeah.
Now that was a lot of money.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah,
But I turned over the $90,000 6 times in the first year.
Wow.
At a profit of 10 to 15%.
Wow.
And by the end of the year, I had my own.
You and Rockefeller.
But I gave a lot of it away.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of money.
No, you didn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but that wasn't probably a goal of yours and everything.
No. It just.
And this textile design, were you involved in it at the level of design, or were you running the business, or what?
I was a director of the whole department.
Uh-huh.
I always put the threads together, created a fabric from an idea as to what it is to be used for.
I see. Practical, but also a great design sense, artistic.
But very technical, very technical.
Technical and artistic.
Yeah.
Artistic.
Yeah, because then I had a design studio. I had 6 artists working for me. I still got 2,000 designs. Would you like some? I want to get rid of them.
Sure, I very well. I don't know very much about it, but anyway.
Well, Jose and I were talking about taking a couple of dozen and mounting them on a good background as paintings.
Right.
No, I can
understand. Yeah.
Well, that's the thought that I have.
That you and Andy Warhol used to do when things was called tomato cans. You could do it with design because they're beautiful. It's beautiful design. It really does and everything. But so back into the thing, you say classical and that's what I was reading papers. You write so well, if I may say so. You write declarative sentences that hang together and make sense and can be understood by people. You want to know
why?
Congratulations on avoiding the gobbledygook, which is so much of economic writing. It's just meant to confuse, it seems to me. Yours is meant to clarify.
Do you know why?
Yes, sir. I would like to know why.
The way we're talking.
Okay.
I'm not writing anything.
No.
But if we get to talk on politics, we'll just be exchanging.
Yeah.
And you have to know what I mean, and I have to speak in a manner that doesn't cloud anything.
And you try and do that.
So I clean it up in my own mind. Everything has to be understandable.
Does that include your writing?
And the other thing is, if I make a mistake,
I
stop and I listen.
Okay, if you make a mistake. If you didn't make a mistake, you'd just keep rolling on.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't.
I make a mistake and then something is raised, I want to know.
Who tells you? Do you tell yourself you've made a mistake? Or does somebody else
Often I do that, a kind of a slip.
Yeah.
But very often, whoever I'm talking to has ideas also. And they will raise questions. And I may find some things that are very interesting.
So you learn from other people.
Sure.
You do, right?
All the time.
It's not all just in your own head.
Like I'm learning from you how to do an interview.
Well, I don't know. Thank you. Well, if I may, sir, I think of this, I call this program Conversation.
Yeah.
And I suggest that a conversation is different than an interview. An interview bespeaks structure. PowerPoint, point A, point B, point C.
I bet I can finish that sentence for you.
Conversation is like free-form jazz.
Up and back.
It's just like Topsy just
Absolutely.
Growth. Yeah, you know?
And I like conversations.
Yeah, I do too. I like conversation better than a linear, structured thing that is called declarative. But you're able to write that way in very clear ways without a lot of run-up. James Joyce would go for a whole page of sentences, interrelated, all interconnected stuff and everything, or Faulkner or something.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
See, the thinking and the expressions, I don't think in words.
Oh, you don't know, really?
I don't think in words. Okay. I may have read something and got the idea, but they form a picture.
Okay.
Now, I have a picture in my mind of what I believe in wherever I am, wherever I'm involved. And other people have another view.
Right.
So I function in a conversation or in an exchange with two pictures. Now, I compare them. Each picture has a beginning, it's changing, and it's going somewhere.
A moving picture.
And moving somewhere. And if you have two opposite pictures that are competing with each other, I don't think of the words, and I have it in my conversation. I describe the differences that I see in the pictures, and the words come.
In character terms, like the Roadrunner and the Tweety Bird, or like cartoon characters fighting, Tom and Jerry, or Groucho Marx or something. Yeah.
And then if I make a mistake, I ask the question, and I want to know more. because the pictures got rattled a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. They got. I had a friend of mine. He used to. A friend of mine, Mark Stallman was his name. He was an investment banker. He took AOL public when they went public, the America Online. But his dad was a cyberneticist and was in the room with Norbert Wiener, the father of cyber of computers. Right in 1948, there were 10 guys in the room. And they came up with the term cyber to describe this thing that was evolving, going very slow like this, from Turing and all that. And then it's destined to become and do everything in the world. But he said information overload permits pattern recognition. And the thing is that we're being inundated with more and more information all the time. It's coming in Niagara and Iguazu combined proportions, the amount of information that becomes available to us, and it permits pattern recognition. And what you're talking about is recognizing patterns, it seems to me. You're recognizing patterns that exist.
Like the patterns today in our country.
Yeah, the patterns that exist, and you're recognizing it that way. And identities are within one system. You got an identity wrapped up in that. And if you have a combination of the two, then you've got a qualitative new thing emerging. A pattern recognition is different than an extended linear perception from one thing to another. It's the meeting at the interface, the actions at the interface, and identities are involved within the going into deep concern. If you're Republican Democrat or something, anything that divides people, they go in deep concern about.
Republican Democrats are not so different, so that's not a good example.
Okay, I know. I was just trying to get at something philosophical.
Okay.
But I think all I know is you're a good guy. I know that for sure, and everything. Now the economics, and you do provide this program for M&M, for which I thank you enormously as member of the M&M team and everything, the Pacific Rim, and you understand China in a unique and very, very interesting way. Is that not true?
I've written 42 articles on China since 1978.
42
and we
articles.
may be doing a book of them because they go from period to period, and you can see the line of development. For instance, I warned them about economic crisis from the West in 2005. We had a little one in 2004 in the West, and they didn't listen. In 2007, I wrote them again to be careful, not to be producing. The proportion of their production should not be for export or for their own development in the country.
You're talking to the Chinese leadership, you mean?
What's that?
You're talking to the Chinese leadership?
In 2001, they invited me to talk to them about the use of social capital.
Okay.
I invented the term social capital.
Yeah, we want to get to that. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So it's a capital in the hands of the government.
So you've spent some considerable time and understand China very, very well.
They think so.
And do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I won't doubt that. Absolutely not. And when I don't understand anything, I ask the right people.
Well, that's also a good trait.
And I get the information.
Okay, so and that's the Pacific Rim country deals with the Pacific Rim.
Now, of course, in this world we have two economic worlds that are developing.
Okay.
The Pacific Rim, because of China being the number 2 economic power in the world, not economic power, economic country.
Okay.
Because, working with all the African countries, the Latin American countries, etc. Quite differently than Western capital.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting dynamic to understand.
So then you have a bilateral economic world today that started to develop in 1980.
80. Okay.
Yes, that was a turning year for world history, economic history.
Okay, it's associated in the United States with Mr. Reagan.
Well, the reason it's a turning year, in 1980, the financial capitalist group in this country divorced itself from the industrial capitalists and stopped loaning them money to build industry.
Okay,
we haven't built an industry for 30 years.
Wow, really? Okay,
that's why we're in deep trouble. But in 1980, the Chinese made a decision to invite foreign capital in and begin to industrialize the country, and they've succeeded. for 1/3 of the country so far.
What was the mark 1980? I think of 72.
It was 1980. No,
Nixon and Kissinger went there in
no,
72.
nothing to do with the United States. It had to do with the internal situation in China.
What was the internal situation?
The internal situation that Mao didn't know much about industry.
Okay.
He asked the Soviet Union to build it up, to have them build it up themselves, and the Soviet Union said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of you."
Okay.
And that's when Mao split with them, because he said, "Nobody takes care of us but ourselves." Well, then Mao didn't know how to build industry.
Okay.
Zhou Enlai did, but Zhou Enlai was second to Mao.
Yeah.
And did not really run the country or give the ideas. So there was a split finally when many of the intellectuals were following Zhou. So for 10 years they didn't do very much at all. 1970 it began to change. By 75 both Mao and Zhou had died, and before Zhou died in 1975, he had meetings with Deng Xiaoping.
Okay.
Deng Xiaoping was just a member of the party. He was not a big leader.
Yeah.
But it was Zhou's idea, industrialize, bring in the West, and then the country can begin to really grow in a modern way.
You make a distinction between industrialization and financial capital. You make a distinction between those two.
No, I don't make a distinction between. You need financial capital in order to industrialize.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah.
We're talking about financial capital. We know financial capital in terms of personal finance ownership, which we have. But financial capital is capital accumulated that can be invested.
Okay,
basically what it is. It could be any country that happens to have it. And then there are groups that have it. There are also governments today
that's right.
that have financial capital, because today there are three kinds of capital, which was not true 100 years ago.
Not 100 years ago. Okay.
Or even 50 years ago.
50. Okay.
You know what the three are?
No, well, it's financial. Private, yeah.
Social, in the hands of governments.
Right. And then the third?
And public.
And public.
Do you know about public capital?
No, well, I don't know as well as I should, and I know
public
you write
capital
on it well.
is Social Security.
Okay, yeah. Huge thing, yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, right.
Do you know that our government has borrowed $2.7 trillion from the Social Security Fund and pays them interest instead of raising taxes?
I didn't know that.
Yes, for the past 25 years.
25 years.
Yes, 2.7 trillion.
That's a lot of
Now, I don't know what interest they pay. I haven't gotten that yet, but I got from 2.6 up to higher than 4.6, so I still don't know what the government is paying. But I have a new idea.
Okay.
You know how to drag this country out of a hole?
Do
what finance capital is not doing. Why don't we loan money from the Social Security system, which is public wealth, and loan it to industry? And industry will pay interest, which goes back in, and industry will begin to grow, and jobs begin to flow.
Well, we are
already loaning Social Security capital to the government, so that's not a new operation. But we loan it to the government so the government wouldn't have to raise the money from the welfare.
Are you saying you should make available Social Security
industry
to private industry?
Yes, because finance capital doesn't loan money to private industry.
Why don't they?
Because they invest in countries where the labor is cheaper, and when they put up a factory, they put up a high-tech factory because you use fewer cheap laborers, and they made more money than ever, but outside the country.
So why would the Social Security be able to be done for something else? Would it be done for public sector things, or
no, we don't have to change the system.
Okay, yeah.
We don't change the system. We just create another bank. But that bank has a different character. Okay, because that bank is owned by the people.
Looking at the Social Security,
just the way everything is right now. I'm not talking about a revolutionary change. We're already doing everything I'm suggesting. Right?
Yeah. Well,
and I think what that will do, it will begin to build up industry. People will get jobs, and they will get jobs without depending upon finance. But finance is not out of the picture at all because of the big monopoly industries which they finance.
Yeah.
So you would have a combination of financial capital investment and also a combination of people's capital investment. And both of them earn. Not the same amount, who knows, but that's the only way we're going to get out of a depression.
Do you think we're in a depression now?
We are. You don't think so?
Well, I can give evidence to that effect, but it isn't like 25% unemployment.
I would like to shore up the evidence.
Yeah.
Since 2008, we haven't created a single job. All we've done is lost some. And they say that when...
You mean in the net?
In the overall.
Yeah.
There was an interesting article in the New York Times this week about a certain sector of the capitalist group doing well, about 2% of them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, in the same article, that nothing is being done about the unemployed.
Yeah.
But the only way to do it is to build industry in a good old manner, and the country can be balanced
again. And you
could
use the Social Security accumulation in order to finance that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and you think they're remnant? That's characteristic in a certain way of the Chinese model?
No.
How do?
But I'll tell you what the Chinese model. I didn't learn it from it, but somehow it got into my system. But now I found out. 5 years, they copied our Social Security system about 15 years ago.
China?
Yeah.
15?
About 15 years ago.
Okay.
It was before the turn of the century, I believe.
Okay.
Anyway, the money began to build up.
Yeah.
Well, the Chinese saw the money building up and not being used because they use government capital, that's social capital.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is private. 60% of the corporation are private. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that. In China.
And 17% of the 60% are private.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
17% of the 60 are Chinese capitalists that grew up as a capitalist group under the communists. And the Chinese government has encouraged the Chinese capitalists to invest overseas where they can build high-tech equipment and ship it into China. So they built 2 factories in Germany, the Chinese capitalists.
Yeah, Germany's another model.
They're producing high-tech equipment in Germany and shipping it over to China.
I'll be damned.
Germany is very smart. They're very close to China. People don't know that. Since 1993.
93.
The head of the German government visited Beijing, and they made a deal for investment and trade, and that is expanding. And that's why Germany is one of the most stable of the European capitalist countries. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that is all fascinating like that and everything. And this, you have a chart. Is this the time we might be able to show people that chart that you bring?
I have
a chart.
An interesting thing.
Good. Is this a good time or should we? No, this is about. You want me to hold it and you can relate to it?
No, I like to hold it.
Okay, you hold it. It's your baby.
I wrote it. It's my baby.
Yeah.
I even wrote a note to myself on the back.
Oh, you got crib notes. Right? That's cribbing.
Okay. Now, this chart was made. I did a study of social change, economic change, and social change.
A lot of it going on.
A lot of it going on. A lot of it has always gone on.
Yes, I was making a
joke.
But
as it goes on, it also changes from one kind of society to another.
Yeah.
And the key to why it changes from one type of society to another is the continuation of building up production.
Okay.
When new elements come into being that can't be contained in the old political economic situation, then they build up a new economic political situation, and that's another type of...
Economic, political, or economic?
Economic and political, which becomes another type of...
Is that like creative entrepreneurialism?
It's like creating... No, it's like creating capitalism or feudalism. And that's what I want to show you.
Okay, fine. Okay, Sean, you got a chart there.
Now, this is the way the world is going to go. Can you get this?
Yeah, they're going to do it. Watch out. Don't spill the water.
I see that. I see it over there.
Yeah,
now, what this shows is the development of production.
Okay, this is over from tribalism, 10,000 BC. Okay.
See, this is tribalism.
Yeah, right. Hunting and gathering.
This is feudalism. Oh, this is slavery.
Yeah.
This is feudalism.
This is the Oriental despotism, pharaohs, Mesopotamia.
We'll get down to them later, but first of all, here's the overall.
Yeah.
You start with tribal, and there's very little increased production.
Yeah.
But
Hunting and gathering.
But then they begin to increase production by enslaving part of their people. So under slavery, production goes up.
Yeah.
It's a different society.
Well, this would be a period that's called Neolithic. That was the invention of agriculture. That was a major transformation.
But they invented the agriculture with the development of slavery.
Well,
it was then further developed.
Karl Wittfogel, he said Oriental despotism. They
but it went further.
Yeah.
It went into feudalism. Now, under feudalism, they really carried that out.
Wait a minute, if I may, sir. If you mind, you've sort of made a jump because there was 1,000 years of Rome, which wasn't necessary. Or do you just blend feudalism in with Rome? Because I associate.
They are not in lengths equal to the years.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you have to look at this merely for comparative purposes of the essence of the system.
I see.
In other words, it was 2,000 years from here to here.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah.
You see?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Good.
You get it?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, but this is only to show the nature of the society and why they go out of existence because they cannot produce anymore. Or new ideas of production come up. Now, for instance, agricultural production became very important towards the end of slavery. Towards the end of slavery.
Well, I would have said it helped to issue the conditions that made slavery possible. Because the Neolithic development was huge. It just separated hunting and gathering.
I don't agree with that.
Oh, you don't?
No. What made slavery possible was what made slavery necessary in order for certain people to develop production and move that production into more production.
Well, yeah,
and
right.
And that's what happened under tribal society. It changed. And when they began to enslave, then they began to go up in production. Now that's where agriculture took a big jump.
Well, okay, go on.
Now,
go on. I'm sorry.
Now then you go into feudalism.
Right.
Now under feudalism, agriculture was tremendous.
Yeah.
And that was the basis. But under feudalism also, they began people who produced things and sold them in the market.
Yeah.
They produced them and they sold them. They produced them and they went to the market, they sold them. But a lot of people were doing that, so some very clever person said, you're spending time going out to sell them. I got a house. Come into my house.
Yeah.
That became a factory. And you can produce all the time, and we will pay you what you get when you go out to sell them. So you will get that much more for the time that you put in.
I see.
So they became producers in aggregate, but after a while, when it was going, they turned around and said, now look, you're making so much and so much, and you can decide how many hours you want to work, and we'll pay you by the hour. You make 10 items, so and so many in a day, we'll pay you that much for the day, what they're worth, and they developed the wage labor system, and that's what happened at this stage under feudalism.
Now you're talking, that seems to me, that's the end of the Roman Empire, and then the hereditary families.
This is feudalism here.
Yeah, okay.
Now they go up pretty big. But now comes here when the factories begin to develop and the wage labor system becomes the basis of major production. Agriculture as well, but a wage labor system.
You have that 1300? You have a 1300?
No, right over here.
1688, that's more.
It was 1600 actually, when this began to develop.
Yeah.
At any rate,
this
development is not the same as the development under feudalism. This, this is a straight line going up.
Yeah.
Over here, it goes up and then it drops.
Yeah.
It goes up and then it drops.
Cyclic.
It goes up and then it drops.
Yeah.
Why? Because there was a relative overproduction in the wage labor system because they can't produce exactly for the market. So there's a breakdown.
Now, where does Adam Smith fit in here? And 1776
Adam
and
Smith
the steam engine. Over here. Okay.
Yeah, in the early days. Okay, now, this goes up and down, but it reaches a point where it's
now you got it in 1980. Okay, okay.
It doesn't go up anymore. It goes down, but it doesn't go up.
Capitalism, as we've understood it,
Well, no, this is capitalism right from there.
Yeah,
It's going up very well, but with a zigzag.
Yeah, yeah.
But then it reaches.
This might be 1930, a depression or something.
Yeah,
Right. Okay,
now, but then you got a big one, 1980 something.
Now, in 1980s,
now what happened?
Yes.
We were still going up a bit, but we were not producing industry anymore. We were not developing more industry.
Industrially.
So we were flat. And then we closed down some factories. So the wind-up was unemployment. Now, what do you do beyond that 19? What do you do? You have to have capital investment. You got to build up industry in order to increase production, because you do not make any progress economically unless the economy is producing. And to produce under the system that we have, which is a wage labor system, you got to produce industries of some kind, or forms of exchange of some kind, or change the way you handle the earth, or the rivers, and all of that. Now, but it requires capital. Now, if the private capital doesn't see a profit and isn't investing, or is investing where they see a bigger profit, and then they decide they're not going to invest.
Over in China or someplace, or Indonesia or something.
They did very well in China.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but they did well under capitalism also. So, but then we reach a point here now. The only way to get out of that,
Social Security,
is to put capital in. There's no capital flowing in there, and the only capital that's available to us today is not private. It's Social Security.
Wow, that big a thing, right?
Yes, and that's what this is telling you. That if this is to go up again, you got to find accumulated wealth. And accumulated wealth that belongs to the public is probably as big or bigger than any privately accumulated.
Has China done that?
Yes. Here's what they did. 5 years ago, and I had forgotten about it, incidentally, when I got this thought. But I had forgotten about it. But then I was going through my notes recently, and I saw that 5 years ago, China saw the money building up in the Social Security system. So they decided to loan some of it out to industry and to take some shares in some companies. And they began 5 years ago in order to use the Social Security funds as capital in the country.
Had they built up a large Social Security fund? Had they built one up and
they're building up everything.
Had they built up a large pool of accumulated funds in the public sector? Yeah,
of course.
They had. Okay.
See, now what they have, if you want to talk about China, they have private capital has done the biggest job of building up industry in China. Then comes government capital, where they built up other industries or jointly. And then comes public capital, which they began to use also. So China is using all three forms of capital. We are not.
Wow, okay.
And we should.
Have they something they could teach us?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're not out to teach us. They're just out to have their country run right.
Right.
It's very interesting.
But they've, I saw a thing.
That's something that they avoid, incidentally. They avoid the position where what they're doing, which may have some other aspects than capitalists do, they don't go sell it to the capitalists. They don't get involved in that. They just do their thing. And if capitalists want to invest in what they're doing, they're welcome. But China does not go outside with it. Now they are investing in different countries to produce.
Yes, they are.
A lot of it in Africa.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
And they have some
natural resources and other things.
They have some problems in Africa because some of the managers that they send over to run the industries that they're developing are not very nice people. And they're being disliked. So the Chinese government is dealing with that now.
That's tricky.
Because it's individuals. And not everybody thinks like a true communist.
In China or otherwise.
Because there aren't too many true communists anyway.
You've studied a lot of Marx, haven't you?
I am a Marxist but not a communist.
You're a
classical
Marxist,
classical economics is Marxism. And the one thing that I learned from Marx, which the communists don't seem to understand, is that a capital, the growth of a society based on capital, as you can see here, can take place under capitalism, and then maybe the society begins to change, and social capital comes into the picture of development.
As it's doing in China?
As they're doing in China.
Yeah, right.
Social capital
They're growing
can be
10%
the different forms.
Yeah.
So now a society grows on both private capital
and public.
and government capital and public capital.
Government and public different.
Government is social.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay? In other words, a society grows on the use of all forms of capital. And what Marx wrote, he says, after a socialist revolution, the bourgeoisie will continue for a long time to come. Because from each according to their ability, to each according to their gain. And the capitalists know how to build an industry.
Yeah, right.
And that's a great lesson that the communists never learned. And that Stalin really destroyed, but Lenin, had he lived, would have moved in that direction.
Yeah, he would have followed in that tradition.
Right. Interesting.
Okay.
So this tells a good story.
It is interesting, a little bit different than the way I hang things in my mind and everything.
Well,
I'm wondering about, we mentioned John Maynard Keynes, right?
Now, about Keynes.
Yeah. Okay.
Keynes is a neoclassicist.
Neoclassicist.
He believes in that the wealth is gained in the market, basically. And when the Depression was on for a few years, he advised Roosevelt. He advised Roosevelt to use federal capital to create jobs. But jobs for the government, not industrial jobs.
Okay.
So that's very interesting because Keynes' ideology was that that capital is private, and he didn't want to mix up the fact that the government could take the capital, use it as capital, then you get a new idea about where the wealth comes from. So he was strictly for helping create a bigger market by creating jobs through the government, for the government, pay them wages, and there will be a bigger market.
Well, you'd have more effective demand.
It had effect.
It needed to get demand.
And that's
we had a productive capability. There was no money to clear the market.
But that's
among the people.
That's a neoclassical.
And he wrote a letter to his grandchildren in 1930, and he was talking about things. Lord Keynes, and everything. And he said, "You're going to be confronted with something. I wonder what you think. You're going to be confronted with something in their maturity, that generation or that area. That would be about now." And he said, "You're going to be confronted with massive, technologically induced structural unemployment."
Yeah.
That's happening now.
It happened in the 30s.
Well, it happened in the 30s, but is it? No, he was talking to his grandchildren in 1930. He wrote. He was writing. He was writing ahead to his grandchildren. About now. That would be.
Oh, about now.
You got massive technologically.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I was brought up in Detroit, right? Let me just say a little quick thing. I was brought in my maternal line, and my family was on 16th Street there. They had a house and everything, and Henry Ford used to tinker in their garage when he was about to build up the Rouge plant and all that. But he needed those people to do that assembly line work and everything. You go on the Science Channel now, and they got things about how everything's made. It's not only cybernetics that is going, but it's also robotization. The whole productive process is becoming so robotized now, and undercutting a labor theory of value that distributes income to the masses of the people through their labor participation.
It doesn't undercut.
What do you make of all that?
It does not undercut the labor theory of value.
It doesn't, you say? Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Everything else I agree.
Okay.
Because what it does, it cuts down the cost of labor without eliminating it, because you still need people running it.
Well, you do, but in a structural
sense. It doesn't run by itself.
No, but it runs to an increasing degree by itself.
So then it's a question of degree.
Well, yes,
Or it's
everything
still-
is. Yeah, you still have to have bus drivers and port. You know, there's people you still need some things.
Not the elimination.
But to depend upon distributing demand, all the capital assets could be owned by a small plutocratic class. They are now. They're all owned. But in order to get demand to the people, they have to have what is called a job within employment. Is the only way you can legitimately get buying power into the hands of the people is for them to have a job on an estate where all the assets are owned by a tiny plutocratic class,
No
which is
question.
characteristic of all of history. But now they're
But
undercutting
not
the
of
means of which,
not of all history.
well, not of
Because
all.
it wasn't money that drove the increase in previous societies.
Okay, good. But sure, yeah.
Okay, I
spell
saw
it.
that, yeah.
Yeah. I see. So you see things different. So how do you see? Are you optimistic for the economic prospect of our planet, or for the political consequences? What's needed?
Well, I see,
what would you
I
advise
see
the
our
president?
planet today
Uh huh.
as split in two,
Okay.
economically.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to struggle for superpowers because China is not building on the military side as well.
They're not building offensive. They might do
Right.
some defensive.
So
yeah.
you have two major countries economically,
No.
but they're quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And their economic and social relations with other countries and other peoples are different.
Mm-hmm.
The economic relations that we have with other countries are in the hands of the finance capitalists.
Well, it seems to be the case. They
Well,
got away
okay.
with. They got away with 2008, didn't they? Apparently,
Okay,
yeah.
that still
Yeah,
are.
I can't believe it that nobody's
But
going to.
right now,
count
the
for that.
Western capitalism
Mm-hmm.
is in a historic crisis.
Okay.
They can't pull themselves out.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about
Sure.
China helping the European capitalist countries. I
They're
saw
busy.
a story on it only this week.
Yeah.
They won't help them. I
They're
think
busy.
that what they might do,
Uh-huh.
they own a trillion and a .2 U.S. bonds.
Treasury
They may
bill.
loan them the
Treasury
bonds
bill.
and let them use
Yeah.
the bonds,
Right. Yeah.
but they don't want to sell the bonds.
right.
Because if they sell the bonds now, they'll go at a low price. If they go at a low price, they'll be accused of driving it down.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So they're very careful on how they function in relation to the other industrialized section of the world. There are two sections of the world now. One, highly industrialized in many ways, but in trouble in the relationship within their countries on the flow of capital and production, etc. Then there's the other part that's building up production and not yet in trouble with economic crises. And if they're careful,
What about the BRIC countries? The BRIC.
well, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now,
yeah.
that's Britain,
Yeah.
Russia,
Yeah.
India, China, and South Africa.
South Africa now. Yeah.
Now, all of them are working together, basically, but then you have Venezuela, you have Cuba, you have
Yeah.
a number of other countries that are involved, and many other countries that are trading with them. And where,
Yeah, that's true.
And in Africa, for instance, capital investments. I would say in a little while there'll be more capital investments from China in Africa than from
they're
Europe.
all over the place down there.
No,
now.
no,
yeah.
but more than
yeah.
Europe.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
the tradition.
and that changes the whole human relationship. So that's where we are right now. There are two economic poles.
Okay.
One is declining. We don't know what the end is going to be
Yeah,
because we don't know whether they're going to. They find solutions. I'll give you one good one. In
now
France,
that's declining is the United States, or I don't understand.
the Western countries,
Western
depending
country-
upon
all right.
private capital,
Yeah,
are
right.
declining.
Okay, and
What
the
are they doing?
ex-colonial, yeah.
Each country will do something different to get out
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Now, France is a very good example. Germany is not in it.
Germany's
Germany
in it, live
invests
by
and
themselves.
trades
Yeah.
with both sides.
Bismarck.
Both sides.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah,
Marx,
yeah.
that also came
And
from
Marx,
Germany.
you're right.
now,
Amazing what comes out
now
of that.
France
move.
came up with a good idea.
Uh-huh.
They had a meeting about 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
I could be off by a week. Of the industrialists, that's the capitalist side, of the trade unions and the government.
You're talking about Germany?
No, I'm talking about France.
France, okay.
Germany doesn't have these problems because they got 5 parties and they work together democratically. Okay? It's a different situation. In fact, it's quite a good example of how capitalists can live on, but that's another story. At any rate, in France, they had this meeting and they made a decision. The unions agreed that they would have a drop in the hourly wage in return for a promise by the industries that they will not lay off workers because they have full employment, and if they were following the market, they would create unemployment. So they made a deal, and both of the major classes worked it out together with the government. So in other words, I give this example to show that many different ways can be worked out to keep the use of capital, private capital, social capital, and public capital, and build up industry so there are jobs and people can live better.
So you don't think that Keynes
never reached that point.
No, he was saying there's going to be a displacement of labor in the productive process.
All right, therefore you have to create jobs by the government to put money in their hands so they can go buy in the market.
So that would be a kind of thing that Mr. Obama might be in favoring now, trying to get more.
Well, I don't know. I'm on top of Mr. Obama. I want you to know.
About what? Drones
with these ideas about the Social Security.
You're on top. You're giving them advice.
I wrote a. I'm an advisor to Obama on China. Did you know that?
No, I would have thought that. I can see that. Yeah.
He wrote me a letter last year. He said, "Dear Sidney, I want to thank you for what you taught me about China." Because in the election campaign, his position on relation with China was very positive. He said, we work with China, we have differences of opinion, but whatever differences we have, we will work out in some manner that will prevent any conflict or resolve conflicts, which is quite different from other points of view.
So what is it that makes it possible for the labor function of government or with the public sector that makes it possible for there to be an answer to the fact that there's going to be technological displacement of labor in the productive process?
You mean
that's what Lord Keynes said about 19. It said to his grandchildren, and that's going to be because it's algorithms. It's things that are going. If you get an algorithm,
he didn't want a mixture of private capital structuring with government money.
Well, he was saying this was something that was structurally destined for the future, and we are now displacing labor in the productive process, both in the public sector and in the private sector. We're displacing the input of labor, human labor in the productive process, which is the basis of the labor theory of value. It could be politically organized for minimum wage and that kind of thing.
Not for the labor theory of value. That's why he said it.
Yeah.
But he wasn't saying it in order to make a change in favor of building it up more.
No, well, okay.
Because he was definite about putting money into the hands of workers so they can buy in a market, but not
and the Second World War got us out of a thing because there was all kinds of government jobs created a world of run, and so we understand that.
The truth of the matter is that if the Second World War had not taken place, we wouldn't have gotten out of the.
That's what I'm trying to say.
We wouldn't have gotten out of it.
But now, do you think that the technology is displacing labor in terms of a ratio with, let's say, capital or capital instruments or machinery or robotics? I was replacing the input in real terms of labor to the productive process that gave value to the labor, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector. It's a large question that's confronting mankind or not.
It is a massive technological. It is a large question.
It can't be done except by just what do you call feather bedding and all that kind of stuff.
No. It's a real problem.
It is. Okay, that's what I think.
It's a real problem because the development of productivity
is usually tied to labor.
It usually reduces the amount of labor time required to produce the commodity.
Well, productivity is usually measured as a ratio of the labor's input to production.
That's right.
No, but that's to underport how important labor is, so that you can get more value to labor.
But at a certain point, you require a proportion of non-labor power with machinery labor power,
Yeah.
so that the number of workers to produce even more is less
Yeah,
than
and so
before,
how are you going
which is
to
the problem.
if you do away with the laborers creating the wealth, and then if you in that process you give them wages, it gives demand, effective demand,
It gives you
the
a
market.
problem.
You got a tremendous productive capability that the people don't have the money to clear the market, and that's a problem we're confronted with now, because we're trying to make jobs.
I want to address
when
that
we should
point.
be making
I
some
un-
ownership
I understand,
as a way to
I
distribute
understand
income.
you.
Okay.
I want to discuss that.
Okay. Fine. We only got about 4 minutes
Now,
left. 3.
Well, that's the biggest problem for the future.
Well, that's
when we stabilize the economy in using different kinds of capital to build it up, and then we will have to learn that the decisions are not made by the private capitalist group, but are made socially, taking into account that you can't make labor pay for it and eliminate part of your labor movement.
Okay, well, that's fair enough.
But that's where we're going.
Do you think there's any
You and I won't see it, but that's where we're going.
you think it's that far ahead? I think we're being confronted with it in structural and design terms. We haven't got a design that lets us do.
Right now we're in a position where we have to use whatever capital is available, not private capital, to make jobs in the present conditions.
Well, okay.
And when we make the jobs in the present conditions, we will then face the new conditions that develop. And then we have to solve that problem we just discussed.
Well, about the, yeah, right. And that might be...
And then it has to be from each according to their ability to each according to their contribution.
Their not to their need.
Not,
You're not going to distribute according to need. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's Mr. Marx.
Well, so the needs come later. After they solve that problem, then come to the needs.
We only got about a minute and a half left. You got a long and distinguished life. You write beautifully. It's really good and interesting. Are you optimistic for the human prospect, or do you sometimes wax a little pessimistic that we'll ever be able to get up with a system that can really liberate the full potential of humanity like it has never been, and also weighing against the fact we have such terrible weapons of destruction where we can wipe out the entire species?
I think that the problem...
Are you optimistic or pessimistic generally?
I'm both.
Both, okay.
It depends upon how the politics works out. There are two things that are involved. One, the preservation of the planet. And,
that would be a good idea.
One section is not doing very well on that. And the other thing is how you handle labor in a period when less labor time is required to produce the commodities, and you had a new proportion between the needs of labor and the use of labor.
Okay, you're writing and illustrates that. Sorry, there's a tyranny of time, and that we've run out of time. Sidney, we've run out of time, far too young. Want to get a plug-in for your assistant, who's very, very important. And his name is, let's let people know that.
Which assistant?
Your assistant, Mr.
Yeah.
Come quick. Come in here.
Quick.
Squat down here. Come over here. There.
Hey,
let's see. Now, this is a young man, and let him know that this is part of the team.
I only have to say something, and he figures out how to get there.
Thank you for helping.
He knows more about the internet than anyone I've ever met.
Jose Martin?
Jose Martin. It sounds like a guy down in South America that made a revolution.
Jose Marti.
Yeah,
The old Cuban poet ladies love my name.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay. Listen,
and
gentlemen.
he's very much interested in collective ownership.
Okay, you're right. Okay.
As a future.
Ownership.
Collective ownership is a future.
Are you guys interested in Kelso or noting of Kelso?
I'm in a workers' co-op, is what he's talking about.
Madrigan, like the thing out of China.
Similar, but actually self-managed.
That's really growing. That's really growing.
Yeah,
well, this is the hope of the future, perhaps. Thanks a lot. This is going to be on the internet, on the YouTube, but it won't be on the program.
I'm glad you reminded us. You got to remember that I wanted that.
Thank you very much for viewing on the internet, on the YouTube. This is there. Thank you for viewing. Your pleasure, Sidney Gluck. Okay, thanks a lot, sir. Very much, such a very, very well led life.
My pleasure.
That continues idly, right. You keep him out of trouble, right? Or who keeps who out of trouble?
Actually, it's good to get in trouble.
Okay.